So today I'm going to give you the week 9 of the NFL Power Rankings year 2025. Some teams who haven't had the bye yet are 7-2 or have a combination of something of 9 wins or 9 losses. And other teams will only have 8 games because they've already had their bye. And they have only 8 weeks of stats. But anyways, let's get into this. Now you'll notice that I have everything subdivided into 2 columns. The reason for that is the problem with a lot of power rankings is people still use facts from and stats from the prior season or previous records, previous accomplishments as part of their power rankings. So if you really think about it, people are biased in one of 2 ways. They're either only tunnel vision looking at this year only, and a true power ranking should be only about this year. But it's hard to say, hey, this such and such quarterback the previous years were not very good. And so I put that in my power rankings bias. And then on the flip side of that, some other people will say, hey, these teams have always been favorites to possibly go into the Super Bowl, and so there's some bias there. So let's start off with the Super Bowl bias. So as my 10th team, I have the Ravens. Now, as everybody knows, the Ravens are 2-5? They don't have a very good record. They played some very close games, but the reason why I have them as the 10th power rankings team in my what I call my Super Bowl bias pick is the Ravens have, if they make it into the playoffs and everybody's healthy and Lamar is playing, they have a legitimate chance to make it to the Super Bowl? And the answer is yes. With the type of key players they have at key positions, the Ravens can be considered a Super Bowl favorite. Now, number 9, I put the Seahawks there. The Seahawks have looked pretty good. They were not picked early in the season as even making the playoffs. But what we've seen recently is they play all their games close. Even their 2 losses are close. They lost to Tampa Bay on a last drive by Tampa Bay. And they lost to the 49ers on a last drive to the 49ers. And they play really well on the road. They're one of the most well-rounded teams. Great at special teams, good offense, good defense, good O-line, good defensive line. Those things bode well for making the playoffs and making it to the Super Bowl. The next I have the Chiefs. Now, you'll find out in the power rankings what I think about the Chiefs there. But the Chiefs, although they are, I don't even know what their record is right now. Are they 5-4 or 4-4? Something like that. But bottom line is I'm sorry, they're 5-4. So right now they would be out of the playoffs. Now, are the Chiefs with Mahomes and Andy Reid a Super Bowl possible favorite? Yeah, they are. Although they would, if the season ended today, they wouldn't be in the playoffs. The fact that they have Mahomes, they have Andy Reid, and history is on their side shows that they can overcome these early season issues, which is the same thing the Patriots had a number of times, right? They end up peaking late in the season, but sometimes early on in the season, they get kind of blowback for not being quite ready as a Super Bowl contender. Number 7 is the Patriots. They are well ahead schedule. They're actually first in their division, AFC East. Nobody picked them to be a playoff team, but they have shown that they are a legitimate Super Bowl possible team to make it to the Super Bowl, considering they even beat the Bills. Number 6, I have the Colts. Until last week, they had the best record in the NFL, and they also look like the most dangerous team and the most complete team. Now, they had some major meltdowns in Pittsburgh. They had, 5 turnovers, 6 turnovers, which is not really what they typically do. Their body of work up to that point showed that they were a really good team, so you can't really leave them off this list. But they went from being ranked number 1 or number 2 on this list to dropping number 6 because they had a pretty big meltdown. But you can't keep them off this list. Number 5 team are the Packers. Now, why are the Packers number 5 versus the Colts number 6? And didn't the Packers just lose? Yes. But you got to look at the body of work. The Packers are a team that can beat really good teams. And the teams they've beaten, boy, at times they look amazing, right? So when you look at a team and you say, is this team really a Super Bowl favorite? Do they have a chance to make it to the Super Bowl? You have to ask yourself, are they explosive? Do they dominate teams? And the answer is yes. When they have a big game against a really good team, they have shown that they can knock them down. And they beat up on some really good teams, meaning that they pound them pretty well. So the question is, do the Packers, are they like Jekyll and Hyde? Do they sometimes play to the competition? That is a true fact. And that may be a coaching issue. They come out looking flat against bad teams. But when they have a good team in front of them, boy, are they prepared. So that tells you that they have the talent. So the lack of focus may be a coaching issue. But I'd rather take a team that can knock the socks off of a really good team than a team that keeps on barely scraping by, where you just don't feel like they can ever pummel a team. I mean, there's a big difference between teams that barely scrape by and teams that, where a third of their games they beat teams by double digits, right? Number 4, I have the Eagles. They are the Super Bowl defending champs, but they have some glaring holes. Where are their holes? Well, the Eagles right now, their defensive line is not the strength that it was the previous year. But their bigger problem is their running game, right? For most of the season, they can't run the ball. And running the football and needing to run the football are legitimate things that Super Bowl aspiring teams have to be able to do. Then you got the conflict with Brown at wide receiver, right? Doesn't seem very interested in the season. He wants more touches and is being kind of a diva receiver at this current time. So with Brown's situation, with a lack of running game in most games, their defensive line not penetrating and adding pressure like they did in their Super Bowl winning season last year, plus that kind of like that honeymoon phase where they've just come off of a Super Bowl win, maybe they're not as hungry as once they were. But they are a legitimate team, so we'll keep them at 4. They've shown that they can do it. Now, Lions. This is kind of another Jekyll and Hyde team, right? At times, they are extremely explosive on both sides of the ball, both offense and defense. They have shown that they can just pummel a team both on the offensive side and the defensive side. But then, at times, they just look flat. Like, they look flat against the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe they just weren't into it to begin the game. And sometimes they look flat. But you have to look at their wins against good teams or wins where they just totally dominate both sides of the ball. And you have to say, hey, when they're playing their best, is their best versus another person's best? Who's going to come out on top? And well, so far this season, the Lions have shown us their best when they're playing and are all cylinders. They have the ability to blow out opponents. There's some teams they just don't have the chance to blow out another opponent. All their games are going to be close. But the Lions are explosive on both sides of the ball, and they can blow out teams. My number 2 team for what I call my Super Bowl power rankings are the Bills. Bills are kind of on destiny, right? I do have some question marks on their defense, but they've been hammered so many seasons about them never making the Super Bowl. I think they're a lot hungrier than the Lions or the Eagles are. And they seem to show that urgency that, hey, this is our year. We have a window of time. We better, put up or shut up. And so I really like the way the Bills have played, and especially since they beat the Chiefs this last week, I'll give them the number 2 spot. My number 1 team is another complete team. The Rams are a very complete team. Except for a couple boneheaded mistakes late in the game, in their kicking game on one of them against the Eagles. The Rams shown that they have superior play on offense, superior play on defense, great coaching, and they show that they're a very well-rounded team. Plus, Stafford has already won a Super Bowl, so he's shown that he's capable of leading his team to the Super Bowl. So right now, I give the Rams the number one nod in the Super Bowl power rankings. Now, the typical power rankings that you give, where you talk about the list is fluid, and you're trying to only gauge it based on this year's stats. Let's start with this one. My number 10 team is San Francisco. No matter how many injuries they have, they seem to still be productive. Now, the injuries are probably going to catch up to them. And you have to look at their body of work and say, what are their actual chances of making the Super Bowl? And you'll notice I don't have them in my Super Bowl rankings, because if I really had to say, hey, their injuries are really going to affect their ability to win the Super Bowl or make it to the Super Bowl, I can't put them in my Super Bowl power rankings. But if I'm talking about week 9 power rankings based on what they actually have done, you got to put San Francisco at least in the top 10 somewhere. Now, my number 9 team are going to be the Seattle Seahawks. They were not picked before the season began to make even the playoffs. But you are what your record says you are. They're great on defense. They're great on offense. I think Sam Darnold is the number 2 ranked QB by QBR rankings. And I think Seattle is legit. They're a very well-rounded team. Now, the reason why they're ranked number 9 on the power rankings and number 9 on the Super Bowl rankings is I think people are still worried about what happens to Sam Darnold in the playoffs or when there's a big game. Can he actually produce? And until Sam Darnold actually produces in the playoffs and wins playoff games, people are going to always have that question mark until he shows that he can do it in the playoffs. So I think they're ranked right where they deserve to be ranked. Number 8, the Denver Broncos. What are they? 7-2 now? 6-2? 7-2? Something like that. And they keep on winning. And they look solid. And they have one of the elite defenses in the NFL. Now, I am concerned about the fact that sometimes they just kind of float through the first 2-3 quarters before turning it on. But Denver looks like they're a well-rounded team. Great coaching with Sean Payton. And they are my number 8 team in my power rankings. Now, the next team, which is I have listed as number 7, is either Detroit or Philly. Let me explain that to you. So, there's question marks about both teams in my weekly power rankings. 2025 power rankings based on your record. No bias involved. You can easily say Detroit and Philly are going to make it to the Super Bowl if you just look at what I call Super Bowl power rankings. But both teams have some issues. They both have kind of sleepwalked through the season. My number 7 team is going to be Detroit, because Detroit has actually beat up on teams. They have been double-digit. They won games by more than double digits, and they knocked the socks off of some teams, where they just overpowered them and dominated them. Now, they sleepwalked through some games that they've lost, but unlike Philly, it just keeps on scraping by and keeps on scraping by. If you didn't know that Philly won the Super Bowl the prior year, and you just looked at their body of work this year, the fact that Brown, the wide receiver, is being a diva and causing problems within the team chemistry, the fact that they have no running game for most of the season, and they seem to be lost on offense for given halves, sometimes the first half, sometimes the second half. They just completely shut down on their offensive prowess. And then our defensive line is not as strong as last year. They've had a lot of close games that came to the very end, and it's great that they're winning close games and games at the very end. But if you didn't know that they won the Super Bowl the prior year, and that they had a good team the last 3 years, and you just looked at Philly as just this body of work for this season, you say, man, they don't look very good. And so that's why I kept them, Philly, this week out of my power rankings, because you are what your record says you are, but you are also how you play the game every week. So I'll give the nod at the 7th spot for Detroit and keep Philly off of my power rankings for this week. Now, my number 6 team is Tampa. Tampa Bay keeps on winning. Now, yes, they've had some close games, but they show the resiliency of being a good team. They show that they're well-rounded, and even with a lot of injuries, they're still winning games. Now, do I feel like Tampa are legitimate Super Bowl teams? Are they in my top 10 as my Super Bowl power rankings? No, they're not, because a lot of close games and a lot of injuries. So I have a hard time. If I was to do a power rankings based on Super Bowl odds, they wouldn't be in my team. But if you're talking about power rankings for the 2025 season, week number 9, they got to be in your power rankings if you have a legitimate power rankings. So they are number 6. Now, number 4 and number 5, let's talk about them together. Both Buffalo and Green Bay, they both show flashes of being really good and Super Bowl bound. And then there are times where you say there's some glaring weaknesses. Buffalo, their defense may be their Achilles heel. Buffalo shows that maybe their defense is not good enough, or they don't have enough quality receivers to make it to the Super Bowl. When it matters most in the playoffs, is their defense going to be able to show up? If they're up against another really good defense and their offense is limited to 17 points, can they win a game by only scoring 17 points? That's a big question mark. Same thing with Green Bay. Green Bay shows flashes of great offense, flashes of great defense, but then there are games where they completely play to the competition, and their defense ain't great, and their offense ain't great. So it's a real question mark. Those two teams have the chance to make it to the Super Bowl, right? But they have both shown there are some deficiencies or some issues. Buffalo on the defense, Green Bay just not showing up, being ready to play. Now I want to show you 1, 2, and 3 together. Rams, New England, and Indy. Indy would have been number 1 in my power rankings if they hadn't lost. But I cannot put a team that just lost and lost badly. Regardless of the score, if you watch the game, they were down by more than 3 scores late in the game before they made it look like it was close. But Indy was not in the game for after the half. They were not in the game. And the question mark is always going to be, can Indiana Jones show up in the playoffs, or is he going to falter and become Danny Dimes again sometime this season? So the record is good. I give them credit for in the power rankings that you are what your record says you are. But until Indiana Jones or Danny Dimes shows up, with this latest loss against Pittsburgh this last week, I'm going to give you the number 3 ranking. My number 2 ranking is New England. They are way ahead of schedule. They are a solid team. They beat the Bills. That's why, with their record, well-rounded, and beating the Bills, I will give them the number 2 rankings. But my number 1 ranking in my power rankings is going to be the Rams, because the Rams have shown they're well-rounded, they're well-coached, they commit the fewest penalties, they got an elite quarterback. Yes, in the past seasons he's been hurt, but they've been keeping him upright right now. Stafford has won a Super Bowl before, and Matt Stafford is an elite quarterback. So when push comes to shove and you need elite quarterback play, Stafford is kind of an it quarterback, right? There's very few quarterbacks where you say, hey, they are elite. Rams have a good quarterback. Bills have a good quarterback. Chiefs have a good quarterback. Ravens have a quarterback, right? So when you take a look at it, you have to ask yourself, is he a game manager or is he a game changer? And I think Matt Stafford is still in that realm with that elite arm and between his ears. He's able to really play well when he's on his game. And so I think Matt Stafford, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson, those are our game changers, right? They're game changer quarterbacks. Now, you take the other quarterbacks, what's his name, with the Lions, and you take the Eagles, and Love with the Packers, and Indiana Jones, and Drake May, who's only in his second season. those are question marks, right? Until those players show that they can alter a game on their own, I have to give them basically the QB equivalent of a game manager, meaning they manage the game. Occasionally, when they're asked to do a play or make a first down on third down, they're able to do that and make sure that they don't lose the game for their team. We want them to manage the game and put them in a position to win the game. But we're not going to have them lift us. They're not going to lift us on their shoulders and carry us to the Super Bowl. And so that's the difference. So in my power rankings, if you're talking about just week 9 only, and what have you done for me this season? Rams are number 1, New England number 2, Indy number 3, Buffalo number 4, Green Bay number 5, Tampa number 6. 7 is going to be Detroit, and I kept Philly out of here because they have such close games and they have so many issues right now. And they seem to be a little bit preoccupied with those other issues. Denver, too many close games. There's been a couple games where they didn't even show up until the fourth quarter. Seattle number 9, and then San Francisco, although they're pretty banged up, they're my number 10 team. Those are deserving teams. Now, when I'm looking at Super Bowl bias, you got to add the Ravens. You got to add the Chiefs, right? You got to add Philly and the Eagles. Those are teams that weren't on the list, but you're going to add them because you feel like past success and the fact that they have either elite quarterback play or elite coaching will get them above to the next level. So those are my 2 rankings, and from now on, I'm going to do both of these power rankings this way because I'm going to give you the power rankings that people do now, but some people throw in such biases that I think that you have to have your Super Bowl power rankings and you have to have your weekly power rankings that kind of divide that too, because depending on who you listen to, someone is really giving you one or the other power rankings, right? And instead of just taking people's power rankings and then have to explain why everybody's power rankings are so different, in reality, people are talking about 2 different power rankings. They are talking about their Super Bowl power rankings and then their weekly power rankings based on 2025. So instead of getting it mixed up, I'm going to give you 2 power rankings every week. Take care, guys.